Qual é a base de uma grande parceria? Como você sabe que pode confiar e contar que esse parceiro esteja lá quando você precisar dele, não importa onde você esteja? Quando se trata de seu negócio, ajudaria a saber que a marca tem 100 anos de experiência, fabricando equipamentos de qualidade, no quais equipes, como a sua, confiam em todo o mundo? Importaria se você soubesse que essa empresa se fundamenta na ideia de que a inovação e a tecnologia podem sustentar comunidades? E se, a cada vez que você trabalhasse com essa empresa, aprendesse novas maneiras de fazer sua empresa avançar? E acordar sabendo que, independentemente dos desafios que o mundo trouxer para você hoje, sua parceira estará ao seu lado com as percepções e o suporte de que você precisa. Por um século, a Komatsu foi essa parceira. Nossas raízes remontam a uma floresta exuberante no Japão que já abrigou uma mina de cobre vital à comunidade vizinha. Dessa floresta e da imaginação de nosso fundador, emergiu uma empresa global com um compromisso intransigente com qualidade, confiabilidade, inovação e a parceria que você precisa para capacitar você a impulsionar nossa sociedade. Hoje, sabemos que resolver seus desafios comerciais também devem resolver os sociais. A capacidade deve ser combinada com dados inteligentes, criatividade com resultados comprovados e sucesso financeiro com o bem social. Por meio da colaboração, podemos criar o mundo de que precisamos para as gerações que virão. É por isso que você confia na Komatsu, a sua parceira para criar um futuro sustentável onde negócios, pessoas e o nosso planeta prosperem.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you back for the second block of the Fórum of Sanitation and Energetic Recovery. To all of those who are here this afternoon, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Rafael Rinaldi. I'm the project manager at MES München from Brazil, and I will be also the presenter this afternoon. After the pause for lunch, we are back here in order to discuss the main subject, energetic recovery. We have two discussion panels, and we do hope to contribute with knowledge, with novelties and insights to all of those who are following us in here. Before we continue, I would like to thank a few people, and I have a few messages to give you. First of all, I would like to thank our sponsors who helped us and made feasible this initiative. Piralisi and Binder, our gold sponsors, and Komatsu, our silver sponsor. Thanks to all of them. I would also like to thank our partner who have really helped us to share even more information about our forum, to Cinesam, VDI, Leader Deutschland, and the Ministry of Regional Development. Thank you very much. And I cannot forget our environmental media partner, Mercantil. Ambiental Mercantil, that's the name. This event is organized by Mass Munchen from Brazil, and we count on 3 important institutions within our advisory board. I'd like to mention them. IFAT, the leading global fair of technologies for environment and sanitation, and BRAIN, the Brazilian Association of Waste Recovery, and the Brazilian Association of Private Companies of Public Services of Water and Sewage. Thank you very much for your assistance in the organization of this forum. I'd like to remind everyone that the platform of this event allows for the interaction through the chat channel, and you can also interact directly with the speakers using the question tab. Every time you have a question which you would like to see answered, please use the question tab so you can send your questions to us. I'd like to remind you also that our event is being broadcast with simultaneous translation into English. If you prefer to listen to the audio in English, you will find an icon with a headset, and you can click on it and select English. The original language of this event is Portuguese, and of course, if it's easier for you to access the platform of this event and use the content, we have a Brazilian flag. You can change this flag to the flag of the United Kingdom so you can hear the translation into English. Very well, initial messages have been given. Now I would like to invite to the opening of the second block, Rubens Aile, the Vice President of ABREN, our partner. And Rubens, I'd like to give you the floor. You have given us full support in the development of this event. We'd like to count on your experience. You have the floor, Rubens. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rafael. Thank you, everyone from the team from Mass Munchen in Brazil. It's an honor to be taking part in this event and to tell you a bit about our work. I'd like to congratulate you specifically and the whole team and everyone who has been working so very hard in the organization of this event. A few months ago, it was just a dream, and now it has become reality. I am the Vice President of ABREN, which was founded 2 years ago with Schmid, who I'm going to introduce to you in a few minutes. ABREN is the Brazilian Association of Energy Recovery. We have been working for some time in order to increment waste to energy in Brazil, implementing best practices. Organizing this event to us is a great honor and a huge pleasure. We have been struggling a lot in dealing with the new sanitation framework. Many things are happening right now in Brazil. They hadn't happened in many years. It's a huge pleasure to be here taking part in this event, and I'd like to congratulate all our speakers who spoke this morning. It is very important to mention many points of the framework. Many times we talk about regulatory items and the sanitation framework. This morning's team, they were able to present very clearly the real potential of everything that's been developed, and we have some concrete examples of things that are going on. As a brand today, I see us as something that work that should be done jointly, putting together the private initiative, public initiative, international and national partners, the federal government, We have more than 50 members nowadays, so it's a great pleasure. And we'd like to give this signal to the market. We want to establish a broad discussion, an eclectic discussion, so everyone can have room to speak and to listen, not only in Brazil, but abroad also. We count on an audience from Germany, from Europe, people from many countries. So we'd like to thank them all. We do hope this is the first of many events we are going to hold from now on. This afternoon, we will talk about energetic recovery. We will show you a few success cases. We'll talk about regulation and about the view of the public and private sector. I will be back 1 hour from now. I will be the mediator of the second panel. I'd like to give the floor to the president of ABREN, Mr. Yuri Schmidtke, whom I have the honor of working with. I wish you all success. Thank you. Thank you, Rubens. Yuri, before I give you the floor, I will cut the transmission line here. On behalf of Messi München and the whole team who worked on this event, I'd like to thank you so much for your support. We have talked for quite some time about it. We have been holding conversations for 1 year approximately, and then we were able to organize this first event in partnership with you. It's a huge pleasure to us. Now, Yuri, now you can have the floor. I'd like to introduce all our colleagues, Andrea, Osorio, and I'd like to give you the floor because you have enough technical capacity to move on with this panel. Now we will have Yuri Schmidtke, the president of ABREN, and Andrea Osorio, who is the director of the Department of Information and Energy Studies of DSP at the Ministry of Mines and Energy, and Jamassi Jr., who is the general coordinator of Integrated Sanitation, Waste and Drainage at the Ministry of Regional Development. Very well, Yuri. Andrea, Jamassi, now you have the floor. Thank you, Rafael. It's a huge pleasure to be here once again as mediator of this panel and talking about energy from waste. We have relevant issues to talk about, and we'd like to introduce them to you. We have the view of the Ministry of Mines and Energy. Andrea Osorio will give us this view, and Jamassi Jr. will give us the view of the National Secretariat of Sanitation. He will also mention this issue. I'd like to give you a brief introduction. Energy from waste, technically, would be the recovery of energy through a thermoelectrical process. This will happen basically through a thermal treatment of the waste, of the non-recyclable part of this waste. And we can even try to make biodigestion fit, but it's a separate classification. And aerobic biodigestion of waste is very important for the production of biogas and biomethane. We can include it. In theory, it would require a thermal treatment only, but in the global context, we should include also thermal and biologic treatment as an integrated part, because they can generate conflicts. For the biological treatment, you remove the moisture which could hinder thermal treatment. We're talking about complementary processes, and one can help the other to be feasible. With these words, I would like to introduce to you the potential in Brazil. We can also have a potential for fuel derived from waste. We have many companies working with this co-processing of CDR. We have 16% of PET for the cement industry. This number can increase a lot. We may reach 60 to 80% of replacement, as is happening in many European countries, such as Germany, Austria, England. They are much at the forefront of this technology. And talking about the selective collection, we increase recycling, we increase the organic treatment of waste, and we increase the calorific power of the non-recyclable part, which goes into thermal treatment. We are talking about complementary parts that work in a sustainable and integrated manner. In the end, we calculated the potential for the 28 metropolitan regions in Brazil and adding cities with more than 200,000 inhabitants. These 28 areas respond for 48% of the Brazilian population, and adding the municipalities with more than 200,000 inhabitants, the final number would be 58% of the urban population in Brazil. So we are talking about investments of more than 79 million Brazilian reais. This is our target as an entity, and these are the regions where we have the financial and economic feasibility for the energy from waste. In these places, we should not send the waste directly to the landfills, even because the legislation does not allow it. Waste can only go to the landfill, and we have this technical and economic reality. It's on the 3rd article of the national policy. So the solid waste needs to go through this recovery and treatment process, and that is what a brain understands. The process should be done legally, and we should work with public tools for the implementation of these plans. That's why we count on the work of Andrea Osorio from the Ministry of Mines and Energy, and from Jamaci, and from the Secretariat from the state of Maranhão. Jamaci is here representing him. They have been doing important work for the energy from waste, and then we go into the circular economy, which is seizing the energetic power of the non-recyclable portion. Otherwise, it would be wasted. So we can use this. We have many opportunities in Brazil, and 40% of our waste goes to open dumps. All this can be used as biogas. We can capture the gas from the landfills and use that as bioenergy until we can structure more sophisticated process. That's what we're doing. We will implement waste to energy in the future. With these words, now I would like to give the floor to Jamaci. I apologize, the microphone was closed. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for the invitation you sent to the Sanitation Secretariat. I am here on behalf of the National Secretariat from the state of Maranhão. He is one of the greatest encouragers of this agenda inside the MMA, and he would really like to be here, but unfortunately he had problems with his agenda. I would like to tell you a bit of what the Ministry has been doing with regard to the energy from waste within the sphere of the federal government. Now I will ask you to share my presentation. Can you please allow me to share my presentation? Yuri, can you see it? Is it being shared? Yes, you can just put it on presentation mode now. Oh, okay, ready. I apologize for my lack of skill here. Well, I have to speak about the main changes that were made to the sanitation framework, and I want to establish a link. Our perception with regard to energy from waste is basically the following. We had two operations going on. They had been implemented a few years ago. We had the to mandatorily provide these services regionally. And the second change, which was essential for the industry, is the charging for solid waste through tariffs or fees. This adds a new perspective of sustainability in the actions of the federal government. As Yuri mentioned, we still have more than 40% of our municipalities in improper situation. They are not disposing of waste as they should. So currently, mentioning what our secretary said, we are in a medieval situation in terms of the disposal. We have uncountable open dumps throughout our country. We still have those landfills that are not taken into account legally. And this adds a new perspective, because we know that we have problems related to how to charge for solid waste. Some municipalities have difficulties in implementing that, and they give many excuses. But with this law, it is considered a renounce to revenue, so managers will now adopt a new viewpoint. And maybe they will be able to give a different response to their ministers, because it's a federal law now. With the idea of aiding the municipalities to implement these changes, the NDR has prepared 12 different tools. We have been working systematically. We already went through 11 states, organizing webinars, events, and I have been working with the National Secretary. We have been doing this work personally, trying to help the states in the management of the sustainability of the public service and the solid waste management. We prepared 2 main scripts, and the first one is here on this link. You can see on my presentation. We deal with the issue of how to add these charges, and we have a few success cases to show. We have Excel spreadsheets that explain very simply how the municipalities can calculate the costs for their solid waste system. And there is another model we understand is also a part of this sustainability script, which is related to public consortium implementation. It's all on this link I'm showing you now. What is the relationship between this work we do with the municipalities to the specific issue of energy from waste? And with these changes and the new framework, we add a new perspective of legal security and also charges, how to charge for this service of energy from waste. So the attraction has increased.
For investments in other kinds of treatment. I have worked in other fronts with the Ministry of Cities, including, and we see a perspective, basically a request for funds based always on the issue of implementing landfills. Today we have a new perspective in face of this possibility of charging for services with various technologies, especially regarding WTE technologies. This idea of energy from waste is not new, but thinking of the changes brought by because of legislation, we have greater interest in evaluating the technical feasibility of this waste-to-energy system in urban contexts. And I'll show you the position of MDR regarding that. You have several different technologies regarding this, and they offer alternatives for landfills with structures which are structures that face more and more restrictions. With the concessions, we have new possibilities of economies of scale, bringing a guarantee regarding the generation of residues, able to foment the enter of a WTE, because these are regional compositions that offer more than 500 tons a day. So we are no longer in that perspective of energy, waste to energy only in large metropolis. So these new obligations brought by the new framework is going to help on that. In MDR, we entered this diversity of actors interested in WTE projects. Due to the work done together with ANA in regulation, we have worked in the last few months on debates in person with the authorities of local governments, planning authorities, elaborating courses. Okay, we find some discussions throughout Brazil.
This is data we have received from ISLA. I already mentioned a few pros in here, the increase in recycling rates, the generation of local jobs. I will talk a little bit more about it because we have been bringing many investments, and we should talk about the importance our secretariat has been giving to the energy recovery. And this would be a sector of the Ministry of Mines and Energy. With regard to using funding in this sector, it's the treatment of solid residues, and it is up to the National Secretariat. This is an accessory gain. We have some social inconveniences in here, and we have been talking to the states. We have some paradigms, and today they have been equated somehow, and they are in the discussion rounds. The audience in general is not convinced yet that these emissions are free from pollutants. It is not true. We have a combustion fuel cleaning system, which is 99.9% efficient. Another viewpoint to us that should be taken into account is the national movement of the recyclable material collectors. they find some resistance in this type of treatment. But the forecast of the current government is discussing the way we separate waste.
Previously, it was defended by those garbage collectors and who worked in landfill and open dumps in very critical situations. These are situations we cannot no longer allow. We have debated this with the national movement of garbage recyclable material collectors. And another situation we are working with, along with some partners with MDR and international partners regarding costs for installation. We have conducted several debates and considering the possibility of studies conducted evaluating the cost benefit regarding waste to energy, also considering the reduction of areas dedicated to landfills, considering the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and all this has to be taken into account so we have a more feasible evaluation regarding the costs of installation. Another debate we have been conducting with the sector, and we are working to attract investors. I'm not going to repeat some of these points. I just want to touch on some of them. The matter of bidding processes foreseen. This brings to a point where we are talking about the financing possibilities. We have been working on this because we are debating this with some municipalities that have become less attractive. This has been worked with MDR. Some the selling of gas, electricity, and so on are attraction factors. Long-term contracts is another issue we are working with them, and which are related to the decree that established the sanitation framework. The foreseen increase in the potential for energy recovery for the next 25 to 30 years, and the large amount of energy available globally would be important, and the surety regarding the price of energy in the consumer project market are points we have been working with to attract investors who have participated in our debate. Another work we have been doing, especially regarding bonds for investments, which we have been working with for Barueri, for example. Subsidies may have a very important role in this process, and from the point of view of the investors, they have a low level of technological risks with regards to anaerobic digesters. They are considered a pre-treatment of residues that is very effective and with low risk. So the anaerobic digestion plants also depend on a variety of raw materials. So this is specific work that is being conducted in our project transfer department. especially with regard to the percentage of organic compounds in these residues. And from this perspective, with the possibility of sending specific lines of credit for this sector, some of the issues we are really considering when selecting the technologies for WTE is the selection of a sustainable technology for waste to energy. This is something that has to be carefully considered when we consider all the players at all government levels involved in the process. All these players have conflicting points of view in economic and environmental terms. We have debated this issue at length, and that also affects the attractiveness of these investments, especially for private investors. So we are conducting some work on this sense. CETESB has reduced the analysis of environmental issues. We have conducted a lot of meetings with the Secretariats of the Environment in a partnership with the Ministry of the Environment. The structure proposed guides the stakeholders to reach a mutual consent decision that is sustainable, and then we need a decision that can be is sustainable for all actors, and I'm working down to city level. The pre-feasibility study is another thing that we have been debating here in MDR. All studies we are working on this technology nodes, they found some difficulty when we're talking about energy recovery in these technologies. And we are conducting an evaluation with a lot of difficulty when we had to work with regional blocks and this issue. So we have been analyzing these systems again to evaluate the feasibility of technologies, and we did some more studies regarding some consortiums, so we can provide the conditions for expanding these pre-feasibility studies when we are considering these technologies for WTE. For local authority, this is work we have conducted all the time regarding the decision-making process regarding energy waste to energy processes. They have to analyze if they are proper for the local plans and conditions. So we need to debate these municipal plans again to analyze the feasibility of implementing WTE. These pre-feasibility studies regarding the possibility of licensing, what we analyze is the amount of waste generated by this technology, the characteristics of this waste, the environmental conditions, climate conditions, the social acceptance of that is very important for MDR, and the relationship with the reuse of materials that can be before this treatment of residues, the consuming product for the products, the distance and possibility of using this energy, investment capital, location, and environmental norms. So these are things we have been working on together with the Ministry of the Environment and the state secretariats.
The pre-feasibility studies are evaluated considering the amount of energy which can be recovered for this technology. In the case the amount of waste is below the limitation, we can maybe involve other cities in order to attain the desired quantity of waste. We have been in the requirements for funding. We have seen different quantities of waste, and they are well below 500 tons, and we always work with these arrangements, sometimes joining a few consortiums or regional blocks to think about the feasibility. So the amount of waste created has a vital role related to this treatment, and biogas plants can be efficient in dealing with up to 30 tons per day. They are ideal for small cities. And you know that if we have more than 500 tons daily, we need to change it, the method. With regard to the acquisition and funding, maybe this is the most critical part for any project. It is not different. Well, it might be considered a challenge, I would say. The feasibility of these projects is challenging. Basically, we work with this funding structure, and we have cash loans. Through our actions, we use resources and funding from the FGTS, and these we do not have availability for investing in the sector. We do believe our action is more focused on funding. The possibility of finding investors who would invest in the project, receiving part of the profits or dividends, and the company's balance sheet. Some companies may fund the project or give loans. That's a possibility. And based on these possibilities, we have other type of operation. So we have different sources of funding, resources from the FGTS. We have some examples from Barueri, for example. They have been selected for investment. For some specific reasons related to the possibility of the 5%, let's say something very similar to a counterpart, there was some difficulty, but we have different incentives. We had a recent incentive. We can add the incentivated debentures here. During the last selection, MDR accepted the use of these debentures. Well, basically, these are the lines for funding from SNS to support investments. Another work we have been doing almost like an ant. We have been working with the local authorities, preparing some scripts for the emission of greenhouse gases. They are about to be published. They have been through an assessment from several sectors, the National Federation of Municipalities, etc. This is a new perspective we are taking. We have a partnership to give courses to the local authorities. It's a partnership with GIZ. That is another form of support to the sector we have been working with. I apologize, this is already the sustainability script. It is drawing some attention. I have shown it to you before. And this is the work we have been doing here at the MDR, Yuri. and the possibility of finding support to this sector of energy from waste. This is what I had to say. Thank you so much for your patience and for giving me the possibility of taking part in this meeting. Jamasi, thank you so much. This was a great presentation. I'm really surprised. You are really doing this in an excellent way, building this agenda. You said restrictions have increased. Since we established the BREM, restrictions have diminished. Since 2019, we were able to have the first auction, thanks to the work of Andrea Osorio and everyone from the Ministry of Mines and Energy. In April of 2019, the Ministry of the Environment published the Ordinance 274. This opened a real run for investments in this sector, and the establishment of a BREM came at the same time. So we could celebrate this regulation that took 10 years to be enacted, really. And also the new sanitation framework. The bus was already moving. It was about to be approved, but in the end, it was a major propeller of waste to energy because it gives mandatory concessions of 30 years for all municipalities. This will help with the concessions, and in partnership with Caixa Econômica and BNDES, we can structure concessions for 30 years, already forecasting the waste to energy. And I would say, Jamasi, that incineration represents a major part of the treated waste in the world. And we still do not have a commercial feasibility that has been proved for RSU. If we are talking about RSU, the technological part is completely overcome. But if we talk about industrial waste, we can mix biomass with RSU. This will work greatly. In Europe, we have many projects that work with biomass, but biomass is 60, 80%. We need to pay attention to those details. Sometimes we see people wanting to use only this waste. And the last study from the GIZ, they do not show an economic feasibility, but the study from a BREM proves that it is feasible. And we have the plant that has been hired 2 weeks ago. So we do have room in Brazil for CDR, anaerobic management, several different technologies. Now I would like to give the floor to Andrea Osorio from the Ministry of Mines and Energy. He's the director of the Department of Strategic Information in the ministry, and he has been working on many relevant agendas for our country. You have the floor. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. It was very important to listen what Jamasi had to say. I already know the work you have been doing in Maranhão and the Ministry of the Environment. We are really partners in this successful work. My cover image is a standard one from the ministry, and I would like to inform people from communication, maybe they should change the image for RSU, because we have that in our energy matrix. This is very nice. Well, it's a gain. And I can say that we worked together. Yuri, thank you so much for your words. I would like to thank you all, to thank Messi Munchen personnel and the brain for inviting me to speak here so we can talk about energy from waste and the impact of development. We have been pursuing more sustainability inside the ministry, acting on several fronts. We know the world is going through an accelerated process of energy transition. This project already exists. It's growing and causing many types of impact. It's impacting countries individually and the international community also. And we are in the same boat. Within this context, waste to energy will have a more relevant role in this transition process. I'd like to show you a slide. I tried to divide my presentation in four major topics. I'll try to be quick. I have lots of info to share with you, but I'd like to give you a view of our planning and how we got to the auction, how this road was built, how we developed our plans, beginning with the Brazilian energetic planning. It was my responsibility inside the ministry, and I can say it was a major challenge. Let us begin with part 1. Here, I show you basically the size of our country, Brazil. It's the largest economy in Latin America. We have a population of 210 million people. It's the 6th largest population in the world. Our consumer market is huge. It's a market that discards lots of waste, and we have an expressive GDP that puts us amongst the largest 10 economies in the world, and we cannot run from this issue. I can say that more and more, this will be one of the most important development strategies for our nation and for the international insertion of our country worldwide. It is affecting the standards of commerce, development, infrastructure, and cooperation between countries. It is very clear to me that each country will go through this process in different ways because of the natural and human resources they have, matrix profiles, level of technological development, and so on. How does Brazil fit into it? The next slide shows that we have here an important participation in several sectors of the economy, several productive sectors. We are the 7th major oil producer in the world. We are the 7th major exporter of oil worldwide. We rank 2nd in fuels, biofuels, and we rank 4th in automotive fuels. We are the 7th in installed capacity of energy. We are the 2nd in hydroelectric generation worldwide, and in the production of iron ore in the world, we rank 2nd. So we have an important participation worldwide. That is why in the Brazilian experience, for the long term, we have been trying to avoid very strict strategies that limit the use of our potential in the development of energetic solutions. The next slide shows the success of this transition for Brazil. It will depend largely on the use of all the technologies that can be used in order to face the need to reduce considerably our CO2 emissions, and waste to energy has a very important role in this whole story. So in this slide, we show the potential. I can say we have, let us say, good conditions. We have many sources. We have a large offer. We can meet the energy need. And here I can say we have 64 million tons of, considering the expansion as an environmental and energetic policy, confirming the potential and the commitment of the ministry to this source, which is extremely important and benefits socially and from the energy viewpoint. I like to say it repeatedly to my colleagues from the sector. The problem is less energy, and it's more related to sanitation and health, public health, than energy.
Of course, energy will greatly benefit us, but we need to know the participation of this, because this is not only a matter of energy, it concerns public health and life. The government has strived to do its part, not only in renewing the energy matrix, but also in its diversity. So here we have several examples of things we have been working with. The policy of biofuels. In the first year of experience, we have already generated positive results, even in the challenging context of the pandemics. This represents a great step for us. When we can increase and use gas the best way possible. For the energy matrix, we have also during this whole period continued working to ensure biofuels and bioenergy as a whole. This sector has sustained a growth perspective. It lasts for almost half a century, since the beginning with Proálcool and ethanol and everything, trying to ensure supply for the country, but guaranteeing the stabilization of this matrix. Less than a year and a half ago, we started working with the policies regarding biofuels. So there is, in addition to promoting auctions, we have an entire policy focusing on various sources of energy. I'll quickly talk about it since we have limited time. How this 174 gigawatts of installed capacity are allocated. This is the participation in the power matrix. We still have a large percentage of hydro power. We have thermal plants coming strongly. Wind and solar, even if they don't have participation that doesn't reach 2 gigawatts, they are growing. And we have nuclear power with Angra still in development, to still depend on electricity. But in 2020, as well as in 2019, the highlight in terms of growth is with the photovoltaic plants. It has grown greatly, and in the next slide, we show also the importance of the hydro sources of power, divided into the 3 categories, but it's still very important in the matrix. But our expectations is that its participation in the energy matrix will be reduced in the future. In this next slide, we show the renewable characteristics of our matrix. Today we'll have a clean and renewable matrix component, and we intend to diversify and expand it. And the participation of renewable energy is of 28% globally. And here we are bringing here the results of our work. Reliable and safe operation of the Brazilian power system shows that we still have some flexibility, and I think the RSU has a strong participation in this diversification and collaboration. Will have, in fact. Next slide shows a little bit of the competitiveness of the last auctions. We didn't have time to update it up to 2020, so I apologize for that. But as I said before, you can see that the solar power has been increasing along with wind energy, and the price of the auctions show that. Let's speed up a little bit so we can go over this theme. It's important to mention that the expansion of power is one of the instruments of MME and reflects the planning of the Ministry of Energy in all areas for the next 10 years. What I mentioned here as a challenge is the planning, because it is really challenging. We are in a scenario of a pandemic. The growth is what we expect. What we have in effect for 2030 poses after a great retraction. We have an increase foreseen, and our economy is still affected by the pandemics. Though the vaccination has been increased and we have taken great steps, we still have the pandemics that complements with great uncertainty regarding the demand. The signs we work with are marked by a continuity of the growth of the economy that will be reflected on greater demand in 2021, as we already see. Another slide, please. This slide shows that according our power planning, our energy load tends to increase in 27 gigawatts in the next few years, which corresponds to 3 years of power generation by Itaipu, and that represents an expansion of the system and a modernization of the system. This the increase tends to happen with renewable sources of energy, especially with wind, solar, photovoltaic, and new technologies that are arising, like hydrogen and offshore wind energy. And this here shows the composition of our electric matrix. You see that we still don't have RSU. We hope to include it in this statistics in the future. It's the diversified matrix that we have. This also is a screen from the PDE, and you see where all the wind and solar is being growing, and the reduction of thermal. A little bit further on, according to our planning, even with the increased demand, with the economic growth that we forecast, we still have a decrease in energy. In terms of biofuels, they have been essential in our policies for the last half a century, and which has ensured constant supply. We can skip this part, and the challenge of the planning is huge. And this slide summarizes the map based on an analysis of the expansion of the PDE, and in the map you see the concentration of some sources of energy, like in the Northeast you have wind and solar, and you can see how the different sources and how the expansion is planned for the next 10 years. In the next slide, we have investments of almost 3 trillion reais, which represent the expected investments in the next 10 years, and we have a centralized generation pointed out by the auctions, which is of 182 billion reais, is still very concentrated in oil and gas, with 2.31 trillion reais. So a lot of this amount comes from oil and gas and byproducts of biogas. Here we have the pillars of the energy policies. What we are trying to do is have a transparent conversation with the branches of the government, the society, and the market based on governance, regulation and legal stability, and predictability. Here we have very interesting conditions for capturing investments. Another interesting slide, in this case we are showing partnerships we have with our legislative branch, with the Congress. We'll continue that in 2022. Many laws that have been approved and which we have been able to approve in the last few months. This slide shows the electricity issues and the auctions that happened in 2019 and 2020, especially focused on energy generation and transmission and investments for the next years. In 2020, due to the pandemic, we didn't have any auction focused on generation, but we have one for transmission with 7 billion reais in investment. We had 9 auctions focused on generation, focused on existing and new sources of energy, the power and emergency auctions. And we had one recently that was very successful for us in our sector, and especially regarding waste to energy, where we managed to have a plant already as the winner of this demand provided by the auction. The next slide, we're approaching the conclusion, where you have the modernization, and with an action that here we refer to the needs for this expansion to occur as a response of the sector players, but with a community and with a framework that is robust and actual, and which has been being organized since the beginning of Ministro Bento's term, not only regarding new renewable sources of energy, but also issues regarding transmission and improvements of this legal and regulatory framework for the sector. What we seek is to expand the consumers and provide them variety so they can have more options, and with a more balanced offer and costs, so the system works securely and reliably, with clear rules, with no new hybrid projects, for example, and a series of actions towards this goal. And the next slide, a little one before, I think we don't have it in that. Move on to the next one, please. Yeah, that one. What we have here is, I'm getting into the, okay, one before, go one back, that one. So here we have the step-by-step of the work we have developed, and which started way back before including RSU and the guidelines and decrees regarding auctions. We conducted several workshops and meetings trying to show the importance and the market we have for our SU in the country, and which deserved more attention. So we have a timeline giving all the steps we took until we got to the auction, from the ordinance and public consultations, declaration of most important distributors, investments, and inclusion of RSU in the products included foreseen in the auction, the ordinance that systematizes this auction, and which all the stages sending the reference prices, the publishing of the bidding process, and this took a lot of work from the team that coordinates the auction sector in the ministry. This is a very long and time-consuming work that requires research, which we worked on, and then we have a summary of this auction. We had 12 projects registered, and 7 were approved, and in a total of 1,694 projects, and we have 12 focused on this sector, going from numbers to power. We had 318 megawatts registered in the last auction. Next slide.
Of these 12 projects, we established a segmentation. We have a persistent, one they gave up, and 7 were approved, and 4 of them were not. 7 of them, a few of them had connection problems. One of them had problems with the environmental licensing, and one had the problems with the land licensing. So we had 4 projects that could not be approved within those 7. And one of them was the winner. It was a 20 mega project. The next slide shows precisely that. It was a project for 20 megawatts, and we had an auction price, which was reduced by 14%, and it was commercialized by 584 reais per hour. Well, it has suffered a reduction, which was expected within this market. We had an average reduction of 17%, and for the RSU was 14. The wind energy suffered a reduction, and gas 25%. So the first time you hire a project for urban solid waste, it diversifies even more our matrix and improves the destination of all that waste. So it was a success, I can say. And many things have improved here. And here I give the example. We have several issues. And all this was discussed after the auction. I believe the next step will be holding a few meetings inside the ministry in order to seek improvements for this process. The ministry will be receptive, as we have always been, to receive people from this industry and discuss the next auctions. This is still a small market. It's a new market, so it's obvious. It is not organized yet, but it will get organized from now on. We have a learning curve, which will be continuous. And the plants that need to register, well, we need to discuss the previous qualification of the players, demanding an assurance of delivery. We do not need adventurers in this market. So this is a very important issue. And allowing other technologies that are not proven, like gasification, plasma, I believe we need to look at those technologies very carefully. Perhaps they are not mature enough in order to be a part of this bidding process. And funding, in my opinion, needs to look at the well-structured processes. We should focus on the efficiency criteria. This is one of the points for improvement, ensuring that only competing in the bid can only have urban solid waste. Maybe we should not allow for the mixture of fuels or co-burning technologies, because this can hinder the whole process. Another issue we believe is important is the bidding process for public services concession. This was the subject of meetings we held with ANEEL. We faced a few difficulties because of that, and we tried to mitigate the economic and legal risk. That's essential. So whenever this problem arises, we have one of those projects with two biddings. We need to talk more with ANEEL inside the ministry, with ETE. I believe this subject should be discussed, and we should understand that we have specificities. This is something new and it deserves attention. We should really focus on those issues. And also the sanitation framework. I am glad for mentioning the sanitation framework. We need to talk to the Ministry of Energy. We have two very competent ministries that MRA, we should join our efforts, we should discuss carefully these issues, and the sanitation framework should be evaluated with regard to the auctions and energy bids. We should focus on this process. So thank you very much. I know I talked a little bit too much. I do hope I was able to inform you and to give you hope and good expectations for the next auctions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea Osorio. Excellent talk. Now we have a few questions and answers. I prepared a question for each one of you. The first one is, which actions your ministry has been implementing or intends to implement to speed the consolidation of waste to energy in Brazil? First question for Jamasi. You're muted. I apologize. I had 2 meetings via Zoom today, and we always forget the microphone. Basically, Yuri, we have been focusing on this issue and trying to help the municipalities to implement rates and tariffs, because we understand the new framework gives the possibility for sustainability. And a new viewpoint, we can work with this treatment through WTE and energy from waste. In the beginning, when we thought about investments in the area of solid waste, I like to say, and I'm going to quote the secretary once again, when we had investments from the federal government on all these resources, the possibility of operationalizing the system, and there are many landfills that became dumps because of the lack of possibility of paying for the costs of the service. So we identify this opportunity brought by the new framework. It adds the possibility for sustainability, support to concessions, to PPPs. That's another activity we have been doing with the municipalities in order to make the WPS feasible. Osorio mentioned the need to have closer relationships between the ministries. The secretary has been really working hard and holding many discussions with the Ministry of Mines and Energy. The first auction for energy from waste was a fruit of lots of work and discussions with the participation of Pedro Maranhão and the MME and the whole sector. So we need to have closer relationships, but we already see a possibility here for discussions that we are holding with the states and municipalities. Another work, Yuri, is related to the feasibility through the regional blocks. When we discuss the regionalization with the states in this area of solid waste, we always take into account the technological pathway of these regional blocks, the possibility of waste to energy. This did not exist before. We talked about the possibility of closing the dumps without thinking about a new perspective. And the ministry has been working on this new viewpoint, and we have been doing hard work. That's excellent news, Jamasi. You can count on our assistance if you needed to present feasibility studies for the democratic process. Now I'd like to give the floor to Andrea Osorio. Andrea, what are the actions adopted by your ministry? What have you been doing and will do in order to speed up the implementation of waste to energy in Brazil? Yuri. Well, I already mentioned this issue during my presentation, which is precisely living from zero. I believe we could establish an important relationship between the ministries, with the associations. I believe this is important, and it would allow the ministry to be present and involved in the whole sector of urban solid waste and biogas, which is very important. We have been working on these issues related to biogas also. So the idea for auctions is trying to learn more about those issues that we have seen. This industry is not yet competitive. We can have good projects. We have some legal issues. Good projects can be organized. And this is what we are trying to do with ANEEL, with ETE. We are trying to find comfortable conditions not only for this industry, but also to add regulatory and legal security, so we can really see the urban solid waste competing strongly with consistent projects that can really leverage this industry. I remember that when we were working on the PDL 29, we talked, and oh no, it was the 30. I apologize. We put only 12 mega per year with a horizon of 10 years, and no one was pleased with that. So really, we have been trying to be careful, I can say. We do not want to be euphoric. We know we have many projects, large projects, and since this evaluation is made yearly, we do expect to have an expansion precisely by visualizing these good projects we can have from now on. Excellent, Andrea. Very good. 12 mega is already in the past, right? Yes, that's it. We should do more. It was almost prophetic, right? Yes, precisely. 12 mega in average. But Andrea, please tell us what's the prospect for these auctions of waste to energy for next year, for 22. Can we consider waste to energy as capacity? When you look at the installed capacity, we have to consider the megawatts. It seems to increase precisely because we have 90% of capacity factors. So what is the perspective of inclusion in the capacity and in A-4, A-5 that will happen next year, and the allocation? Well, it's precisely as you said, urban solid waste adds power. It has a high capacity factor and it has a high parity. That's exactly what we need.
With this capacity auction, it's not my area, so I can't tell you exactly. There are other people in the area that can talk about it more properly, because auctions are not my specialty, but it's been considered internally, not only in terms of participation, in terms of power, but also in this A-4 matter. So this is a matter of defining the agenda for future meetings to see if we can make projects feasible in less time. So these are projects that require an average time to make them feasible, from the initial license to operation. We know it will take 4 to 5 years, so we need to be sure that we'll be able, in addition to having good projects, to meet these goals, that when you shorten them, they become more challenging for the entrepreneur. Yes, Andrea. This wind and solar plants, they work with A-4, -6, -5, but they can shorten the time and they can have a huge difference. When with this difference in the market, they can do, they work with a free market. For us, it doesn't make sense to work with the A-5 or 6, but -4 we could think about it. If you remember, we had an auction where we allowed shared a product with biomass. I think it was 2014 or 15, where waste to energy had was very hard to beat on because of these issues. If today they really reflect the work that was done carefully by us, and that make it possible or make many projects feasible, many good projects, but uh, the lack of approval was something that took some projects out of the process. And I think this is a game changer. This was some great work our team did. We received a lot of criticism regarding that because of the way we did it. But we see that this prize is something that was based on several different indicators, and we used a lot of data. And this partnership to make this feasible was very important. We'll have other auctions, and we need to have an open, transparent debate and discussion. We work this way, and I think we'll be able to create new auctions to include waste to energy. I have no doubt about it. Andrea, I just wanted to answer a couple of questions. Power Purchase Agreement, PPA, it's a contract that we call CCAR, the contract for energy in a regulated environment that Andrea mentioned, which is signed by participating concessions and solders. So we had several CCRs, and they are given as an insurance for the banks, along with a contract with the municipality ensuring the supply of waste to generate energy. So we have a regulated auction with long-term agreements, and these agreements with the municipalities to make that feasible. And now we have a final question. We have 5 more minutes. People get two things confused, public consortiums and regional blocks. Could you explain the difference between these two things and what we need to be able to implement the regional blocks? Because, Jamasi, from my point of view, if you leave it to the municipalities to create consortiums, it will be a failure. Many times they don't want to create this consortium. You need an authority that says, this is the block, you have to get together with these municipalities from top to bottom, and you tell them you have to work together. So you have to have hierarchy in the management and creation of these groups of municipalities, whatever shape they take. But they need top to bottom guidance. And the ministry and the National Secretariat of Sanitation can bring scale and cost reduction to some projects. And answering another question, there's a study by BNDES from 5 years ago. They say a landfill from 100,000 inhabitants will the cost per inhabitant will be reduced. The larger the landfill, the smaller the cost per number of inhabitants. If we don't have this minimum amount, we won't be able to reach the power we need. So you have the floor, Jamasi. This work regarding regional blocks is foreseen in the new legal framework in this hierarchy you mentioned. This new framework leave the state governments responsible for that, for making the possibility of regional blocks possible. The matter of intermunicipal consortiums, it's a kind of regional block that is composed as one legal entity, one manager that will manage the group of municipalities properly legalized and cared by city representatives. This was an imposition from the Secretariat of Sanitation. We worked a lot to present this to urban solid waste, to get the Ministry of Economy to agree, and providing existing consortiums could be accepted as regional blocks, because until then, for water and sanitation, intermunicipal consortiums were not foreseen as the ones for urban solid waste are. In fact, there are several debates going on at local level. Some of them foresee resources created, for example, by the National Foundation of Health for the disposal of landfills. This municipality understands that since they have that funds for his landfill, this would leave them in a different situation, and they wouldn't need to worry about providing or making this landfill available to a neighboring city. So the ministry is already working with local authorities, working on previous funding systems wherever the funds come from. So these municipalities will then, through municipal consortiums, make the possibility of using these landfills, letting these landfills be used by neighboring municipalities. This is a work under the authority of the ministry, but we have been working with the states. Our secretary has been working directly on that, and what he's been taking to debate, he's taking this to private associations who work on the concessions with the municipalities. So he brings into the debate the city representatives, municipalities associations, local authority is per state. We have been through 11 states to debate this issue. In some, it has been very productive, like Mato Grosso, for example. They have already foreseen some regional blocks with a composition of 19 consortiums. Right after our visit and our conversation, we have 2 days of meetings there, and we managed to rearrange the state from 19 to 4 consortiums. And this really increases the feasibility and the possibility of WTS. Jamasi, this is fantastic. This is a wonderful work. It's no use having auctions if you don't have concession contracts, and if you don't have these arrangements, it's not going to work. So you have to work together so we can work on this waste to energy issue. So I'll make a suggestion. So we have large companies that already manage these issues, that already have regional blocks ongoing, focused on waste to energy. They can charge into the bills that are already sent. You can include waste to energy issue in this. Well, I just want to correct and say that this is the work we have been doing. This is the great gain we have obtained. For example, we have a company participating in all the conversations we had with 11 states. The possibility of situations like we have in Mato Grosso do Sul. If I said Mato Grosso, but no, I'm talking about Mato Grosso do Sul. And it was very interesting because we had the presence of the governor of the state in the debates. He participated himself in the event. And there we also had a initial composition created by the state government and private initiative. Private companies consolidated many concessions in the state. They reorganized and created these new intermunicipal consortiums. To achieve the universalization, we only need to include the municipality of Dourados, who was left out of this block. Blocks we're trying to include it and having many conversations to see if we can include them in one of the blocks. But there, what was very interesting is that it came from the existing concessions. They started to understand that it was more feasible to work with the existing concessions than staying regional blocks created by the state government. So it's very important to include the private sector in these conversations. Jamasi, the idea of this event is to bring the sector together all over the country, which we haven't been able to do in the entire country, but this is something we see in other countries. So we have companies, the largest company in the world is able to invest heavily. So we thank very much for your participation, and I want to pass the floor on to Rafael so he can continue the next debate. Thank you all for being here, and don't miss the next debate. It's going to be great. We'll have great people participating in it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, Rubens. Thanks to everyone who's here with us. We are available if you have any more questions. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I believe the opening of this block could not begin in a better way than those discussions we have held today. Andrea with energy, and he gave us a lot of information. Jamasi also contributed enormously, talking about the work of the Sanitation Secretariat. And Yuri, thank you so very much for being the mediator and for complementing so much. Precisely as you mentioned, we are holding a discussion. We should be able to reunite not only water and waste, but we should add solid urban waste, and we should be able to close this cycle. I believe, if you allow me to make a comment before I call Rubens and our colleagues from the next panel, I believe it is very clear to us that during this presentation, Brazil is really throwing lots of money away in the garbage. We cannot make the best of a very rich raw material to generate energy. And we are here taking a first step, encouraging discussion so we can literally stop throwing money away. So thank you so very much for your contribution. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, everyone. Very well. Let us continue and move on to the last panel of this event on the block of energy from waste. I would now like to invite Rubens Aebi, Vice President of ABREN. He will also be the mediator for the next panel. And Flávio Matos will also take part in this panel. He's Vice President at WTERT Brazil, and he's a board member at ABREN. Marcos Peracelli, Sales and Business Development Director for Latin America at Babcock and Wilcox. And Laura Sarmiento, Transformation Director at Veolia Brazil. The next panel will debate success cases and international experiences in waste to energy. Colleagues, I'd like to welcome you all into our discussion, and I will now give the floor to you, Rubens. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you to everyone who took part in the last panel. It's good to have a linearity. I'd like to thank Osorio and Jamassi. I believe that showing the existing alignment between entities and the government is extremely important, showing that we have regulations and that things are moving forward and are evolving. I believe that everyone would like to see now in the next block the success cases, what we can learn from other countries, what we can learn in the sector. As we always say in the ABREN, we are not reinventing the wheel, we are looking for the best practices in a sector that exists in other countries, has existed for a few decades. We'd like to bring these experiences to Brazil. So we will have a few discussions. I'd like to introduce Flávio Matos, our board member from ABREN. He's talking from Paris. We also count on the presence of Marcos Peracelli. It's an honor having him as one of our associates. That's one of the most responsible companies in this sector in the world. And Veolia is also here. Thank you so much, Laura Sarmiento, for being here with us. It's an honor to count on your presence. She is also one of our members from ABREN. Having said that, I would like to leave the space open for a Q&A session. You can ask your questions. This is a very important panel, so we can also demystify a few issues related to waste to energy, looking for reinforcements to address words. As he said, we need to talk between sectors. We have a strong intersection between both sectors. We cannot think only of the electric sector. It's a broad issue that should incorporate more things, and I'd like to thank you all and thank Mass München for organizing such an eclectic event. We could have a week of event discussing cases. We do hope to have a presential event soon. Everyone is tired of webinars after the pandemic. We do hope to have presential meetings soon in real life. With respect to the rules, let us move on. Now I'd like to give the floor to our colleague Marcos. It is a huge pleasure to count on your presence here. We'd like you to tell us about what you have to show. I'm quite looking forward to hear what Marcos has to say. Hello, Rubens. Good afternoon, everyone. Laura, Flávia, Jamassi, Andrea, Pedro, everyone who's following us here. I'd like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity of talking about the subject. And I'd like to say I believe we are doing the right thing in our country. We have discussed and presented many elements here. I have been following the event, and I'd like to show you a few slides to show you our experience in this project. During the last 8 years, we have been working with waste to energy, and I'd like to establish a parallel between things that have been happening and elements that are aligning. In my opinion, they will all contribute to give us success cases here in Brazil. I do believe we will have these success cases here soon. I don't believe this is very far away. After the first auction, I believe we will be even closer. We had a successful auction in Barueri for energy to waste. This is the first step of many steps we'll take from now on. Let us try to understand what success is when we talk about projects for energy from waste, using urban waste. I'd like to share my screen now. I do hope you can see it. Yes, we can see. Great. I believe that we have some elements that can help us to understand the paths that will take us to a success case. We should understand that we have a market, we have demand, and above all, there is need. As Andrea mentioned during his presentation, one of the missions I have as a representative of a company that works with technology for these projects, this is not an energy generation project, it's a public health project. And coincidentally, it generates energy and also adds many benefits to the surroundings of the plant, social benefits, sanitation. This is an operation that involves much more than energy generation only. Unfortunately, we were unable to go into details and prepare that famous spreadsheet to evaluate the returns more clearly. We are trying, and we are holding this discussion, and we are trying to monetize what healthcare is. And we do want to consider all these benefits as an element for funding. But I can show you this chart. Every 15 to 20 years in our region, in Latin America, we have 25% of waste generation. Will we have space for so many landfills? We might have a lack of option, if you don't mind my language. But we really need to reduce the volume of landfills because we will not have room. This is simple. The next slide. I apologize, I was unable to translate this material. We did not have time. If you have difficulties with the English, please let us know. I will tell you what it is about, so do not try to read it. But besides trying to eliminate these landfills, more and more, we should think about where we are going to deposit waste. This problem exists not only in Brazil. It's much more difficult to structure a landfill following the rules and standards that need to be respected so that it really meets the needs. It is not just a dump. Everything that's related to the emissions of gases like methane, they are extremely harmful. We have already seen those figures many times before. It is essential to show that these gases that are generated in the landfills should be carefully managed. It's essential to focus on the reduction of the greenhouse gases. Clearly, it's a renewable energy. So it's good to consume renewable energy. If you are an entrepreneur, if you own a company, you can feel proud when you say that's what you do. Many companies do it. They like to be labeled as green companies. You are consuming renewable energy. And then we can talk about costs. More and more, we need to think about the logistics involved in the transportation of waste to a landfill. Can you imagine how much more complicated it's going to become to obtain licenses, authorizations? The situation is going to be worse. We are also seeing the limits in quantity. As Yuri always likes to say, we have room for many different approaches that we can adopt. Maybe we can consider incineration as a way to recover energy. This has a limit. It has a specific size. We cannot go beyond it. We have populational issues. We have limitations of space. So we can use other technologies, other approaches. I believe this is a healthy idea because, once again, I repeat, we are talking about public health projects, not energy projects only. Now going to the next slide, I can say methane has 84 times more emissions if you allow people to ingest methane. This data comes from the US. More and more, we should avoid opening landfills. In some American states, you have laws that forbid the creation of new landfills. The states have freedom to determine what to do if you can or not open new landfills. One state prohibits that, and the other state has lots of room and allows you to open new landfills. It really varies from each region, and it varies from country to country also. However, these decisions have their own space, and we also have incineration options. What is WTE doing, and how can we contribute for successful projects?
We have been working with the generation of vapor, and throughout this time we have been present in various markets. We've made mistakes, we have learned, we have improved. So today we have about 500 units around the world, most of them in Europe and Asia. We're working with waste to energy in several modalities, with several different compositions of residues, and meeting environmental regulations of all these countries. Be them more or less strict, it doesn't matter. Throughout the world, as I says, through acquisitions or development and research and our own investments, achieved the technological level necessary that corresponds to the needs of each location or country. So here we have a little bit of history since 1931, as my Flavio Matos said. Where in 1931, you are probably talking about a barbecue grill or something. I wasn't there to say that, but we already used some kind of technology to obtain energy from solid waste, especially in Denmark and Norway. They were the pioneers. Babcock and Wilcox acquired the company and brought this American knowledge, combined it with European knowledge, so they started generation vapor from chemical or fossil fuels, and brought it together with the knowledge we had. And the company was specialized in solid waste and residues. And then in 2010, we acquired another company that had what we were missing in terms of technology, and we were missing in our portfolio, with regarding this area. For those of you who are not familiar with it, here you have an idea of the arrangement and the scheme from the right to left. You have an equipment that captures the residues, brings it into the over to the grill where we'll show more details, and there the residues are maintained in there long enough to be processed within the combustion system, being transformed into pure, always reminding you that this fuel can come in any shapes or forms or compositions or level of humidity, and the system must be adapted to work with it. In Brazil, we have a clear preference for recycling and selection of the material that's coming in. In other countries and other legislations, simply allow the owner or developer to simply come in when with a truck without any prior processing, and the processing will happen after what's left with the ashes, and separate what the ferrous metals and things like that. So we have the control of emissions. What determines the qualities and limits of chemical components, particulates, or so on and so forth, all the contaminants that can result of this physical chemical reaction are evaluated, and the system will be adapted and designed so that what comes out are acceptable in terms of contaminants according to the local legislation. So I can tell you that, to summarize the idea regarding the quality of the what comes out, has to do investments. So the air that goes in to the system, when it comes out, it's even cleaner than when it came in. It has a cost, and that is determined by legislation and the investor. Of course, when you're talking about a project, you have to see what suits you. So as I said, we burn everything in every way. There's no preconceived idea like you can't have this or that. No need of conflict regarding specific goals like recycling, or if you need to provide a social work that adds value to the local community. There's no problem. You are able to use it and make the project feasible without any generating the desired benefits with no problem. But if at that time there's no indication for that, you can simply come in with the design with the capacity you need. The truck will come in on one side, you have the equipment on the other, the waste is burnt inside, and the system works continuously with the capacity to generate power into the network continuously. The system has a reliable, uninterrupted generation, compliant with any other generation systems. It's not to work with peaks or bring other benefits to the network. It can be designed the way you need. Here what you have, just an illustration of what the grill would look like. This is part of the technology we have developed so that it can be moved and maintained to obtain as the maximum energy availability of that material. If we didn't do this, the waste would probably go through, be burnt, but we wouldn't extract the energy you have. So what you have at the end are ashes. It can be mixed with air, with water. It can be sold prepared to be cooled with water and be used in other ways in your project. Quickly here, you have a picture on the inside of the system from bottom to top. All these are thermical. All these are coated with a material which is an alloy, steel nickel alloy, protected against corrosion. So it will work regardless of how acid or is the material or of the composition of the material. It brings you the effectiveness you have with maintenance cycles that are feasible, that are reasonable. This is not something that will bring you safety products. For example, you have fuel from a specific city that has a different composition and the equipment couldn't stand it. This is something you have to take into account when you're talking about projects. And the client says, oh, this is expensive, isn't it? If depending on the installation you have, you don't need that much sophistication. When you have traditional fuel, well-known biomass or oil or gas that are kind of clean, you don't need that. Your maintenance cycle is longer. Your investment will be different. It's easier. We have been working trying to replace this more expensive and noble material with more functional materials that will provide you with the same protection with maybe a shorter maintenance cycle, but with a better use of capital. So sometimes you have these differences. Those who are focused on CAPEX or OPEX have different perspectives. So we want to offer that can balance all that, where you can have the best equipment with a maintenance and operation cycle that are reasonable and can make your project sustainable. This presentation will be available. So depending on the arrangement, we have different technologies and approaches for all possible gas contaminants. Of course, they will all be incorporated in the project according to the requirements of the local legislation. Case studies, most of them currently are in Europe. I'll go through some beautiful architecture installations. This is something very typical of Europe or of their culture. This is a very well-known plant. Its interior it's with boilers that are built in a specific way. This is in downtown Copenhagen. Of course, you don't want waste-to-energy plant downtown, but you can do that, and you can make it look friendly. You can have a nice appearance to that plant, and people won't even know if this is what you have inside those facilities. So the technology allows you to have these successful, beautiful facilities without any odor sent into the environment. We have all these success cases. They took a long time in planning, of course, but they were successful. Here is another one in Sweden. This is a different structure. They have a legislation there's different because their energy is destined to heating for the communities around it, not specifically for energy. They have some Arctic climate over there, so you can understand. This one is in Scotland, another one in the United Kingdom. As I said, the main thing is physical space. The need or restrictions regarding physical space lead the government to think of that, because at the end of the day, you get to a point where the cost of transferring your waste to a distant location is too high. The cost of fuels are going up and will continue going up. So we look with a different view to this kind of projects. This is another one in the United Kingdom. And now I'm going to stop for a bit to talk about this plant that is closer. It's in Palm Beach. We would call it, if we were talking about other brands, this would be a flagship store. They have all the wealth of technology, because we wouldn't need all that here, because here we don't have hurricanes, so climate restrictions are not that strict. Their legislation requires several structural things, or environmental legislation is much more restricting. You have to have it in a planned area with a good appearance for the building and all that. But for what we are looking for here in Brazil, and this is important to mention, here we need to look at the basics, the rice and beans thing. The equipment that is going to work well, get you the most out of your fuel, and generate the results you expect. This comes from knowing your full preparation, studies, and reliable analysis done by professional technicians. This takes time. This is a necessary investment, because another factor that contributes to the cost of this is that a project is totally customized. It's done for you, for your data, for your area, and all those. You have something basic, you have a lot of flexibility, because the waste generated in the summer and in the winter are different. From one city to the other, habits are different. So you need this flexibility, and you need this range, this flexibility, and it has to be higher for boilers with more stable fuels. So what works there doesn't necessarily work here. What's expensive there might be feasible here. And it all comes to preparation, reliability of data, and reliability of the equipment, and the performance of the equipment. We know that 1, 2, 3 megawatts that you cannot, okay, that I can guarantee for you, because I know your fuel and I size the boiler properly, use the proper surfaces and everything, and make it more efficient. I can give you a return of 1 or 2 additional mega, and that's a lot of money. So this all comes from this preparation phase. And you have to pay attention to see that you have a feasible project from the start, and you avoid adjustments and reviews that could render your project unfeasible.
West Palm Beach is a different plant. They have 2 boilers, 907 metric tons per hour. One day each functions, and we have 3 other boilers. One of them is from 85, and the other one is from 2015. The last 3 boilers have the same capacity, 907 metric tons per day. The installed generation is approximately 150 megawatts, and they have 2 setups. One with the whole selection, recycling structure, and waste classification. That's the oldest one. 2,000 tons are done like that. And the 3 newest ones with gas burning have been designed so you can throw waste all day long, and they work 24/7. They have a complete system. They do everything related to emissions control, from combustion to cleaning, ingestion of reagent products, monitoring of chloride acid, particulate filters. This plant has everything. Sometimes we feel scared of sharing all the references for this plant because it had to be like that, and the community has paid for it. Even to tell you this story, this reflects the story of success. The second unit was commissioned in 85 with the 2 boilers. And when in 2009, 2010, they realized the landfill was filling much quicker than it should. So they had a public consultation with the community. What do we do? Do we open a new landfill or we invest in a new plant? The public consultation showed that most people said, we want a new plant. So there was investment from the community, the authorities, and they decided to expand the plant, and this reduced by 95% the volume of waste in the landfill. So any concerns they might have had with the the duration of this landfill was left behind. So this project feeds more than 40,000 cities. They bring waste from 19 or 20 cities from West Palm Beach, 5,000 tons per day in average. Approximately 70 to 80 people work there 24/7. They have a major metal recycling business. Just to give you an idea, approximately 2,200 metal tons per month. These metals are recovered, and non-iron metals approximately 60 tons per month. This is one more contribution to the environment because it's recycled material. You do not need to process the ore, and you avoid all that work involved in the conventional treatment of steel and iron. You save carbon and the whole technology, and you have an additional revenue for the company, for the plant. What else? They have a negative emission of greenhouse gases. They have solar plates for a few of the facilities. They have a visitor center. In the previous presentation, I heard about the acceptance of the society. They thought about it. I visited that plant twice with clients, and they always had visits from community members, from schools, and they liked to show the benefits. There is a need to educate the community because there is bias. Waste stinks, it's dirty, it carries impurity, it contaminates. If it is not well planned, yes, you are right. It should be carefully managed, but you should show the other side. If you plan it correctly, you'll have no smell, no noise. You will have only benefits, no vultures. So that's what they do, and it should be taken into account when you talk about success cases. And One more thing that in Brazil could be necessary is a refrigeration system for the water involved in the process. The system used in the boiler is an air system. If I'm not mistaken, this building here is the ventilator system of what we call the ACC air convert and well system. It is not a water cooling system. That's precisely to save water that would be used in this process. Well, this is what I had to show you. That's a success case. So if we could bring it to Brazil, I can see the involvement from the government. As you can see, the willingness. We had the auction, a brand was established. Many agents from the sector are promoting this somehow. They are making noise, attracting suppliers, especially technology suppliers, mobilizing other companies in the industry and contributing to a good structuring. I believe we are doing the right thing. We are following along the right path, and we have great chances of making it happen. If you ask me what we can improve, I believe the structuring of the project and understanding of how this should happen could be a little bit more strict and more detailed. We should take care to be surrounded by the right elements in terms of emissions, licensing, authorizations, area availability and contracts, etc. All these projects took years of planning before they were really built. There were many conflicts, many litigations, but if you have a good structure behind you, you are successful in the end. So this is one point for improvement, but I believe it's a natural process that we will see. It will happen. I am really excited. I do believe I was able to add some value to you. I am available if you have any questions. Thank you. Wonderful. Marcos, thank you so much for your presentation. I believe that to our audience and to those who are following these and do not know a lot, it was essential to show this data and to show how things work in practice. Thank you for showing the technical part. Everyone should have the privilege of visiting one of these plants once in their lives. The most emblematic thing you have shown was the one in Copenhagen. I had the pleasure of visiting the place personally. And as you said, we think, well, I don't want to have lots of waste close to me, not in my backyard, as people used to say. It is very interesting. We have a habitational system very close, and the palace of the Danish kings is also very close. As Flavio has shown in some presentations, this is not really harmful. Many people don't even know what that is. Some colleagues pass in front of the plant in Vienna and they say, what is that? What's this plant? They don't know what it is. They say, well, actually, it's an incinerator. Certainly, it's much more pleasant than other destinations you mentioned. People would not like to have a landfill close to their home or in their backyard, right? It requires less logistics. The cargo center is close. So I believe we should have the first ones in Brazil so we can really demystify this bias. The population has bias. So your presentation was great, was really helpful. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you once more. As usual, it's a huge pleasure to have you here with us. If you have any questions, please feel free. Send the questions to us. Well, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Laura Sarmiento, our Director of Transformation at Veolia Brazil. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. I'm sure Veolia has a lot to show, to tell us. You have lots of stories. We'd love to learn a bit from you, and we'd love to see how you are working in Brazil and worldwide. You are welcome, Laura. Thank you, Rubens. And congratulations, Marcos, for your great presentation. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you today to talk about this interesting subject. And I believe Veolia can do a lot for Brazil. I'd like to share my presentation with you. Can you see it now? No, not yet. Please put it on full screen, Laura. Okay, perfect. I want to show you the energy matrix, which is part of a country. There's no doubt that the part of non-renewable energy is much larger. And Brazil is well advanced with regard to that because you have a hydric energy and other plants that generate power. We all know we have lots of work ahead, and we believe that waste to energy can be a very important energy. It is being used in other places in the world, and it will be used here in Brazil. I'd like to say that I loved Marco's observation when he said that waste to energy is not only an energy project, but it's a public health project. And it seems to me that it goes much beyond the energetic matrix. It is also related to the improvement in the quality of life of people because we all work focused on that every day. And in this presentation, I would like, first of all, to tell you quickly about Veolia, just to give you a context about our experience and some of what we can add. I'd like to show our view of the Brazilian market very quickly. And our time can be focused on the development of projects that I believe is what will really be more interesting to the audience that's following us today. Quickly, Veolia is considered a global reference in ecological transformation. I will not go into details related to figures, but we deal with 47,000 million tons of waste. And here in Brazil, we are trying to transform in ecological parks, the areas where we treat the waste, and we deal with more than 500 tons per day. And in this effort, we identify the technology of waste to energy as a value, and it will be really helpful in the transformation. What do we do? Veolia doesn't only manage waste. We also work with water, energy, and as someone mentioned before, I believe Marcos said that these activities can be combined. And we are here today to talk about this combination of waste management and energy, which is so important to generate this circularity. I believe it is very important to show you what we are doing and why we do it, because we want to carry and organize other projects. We believe it is very important to work with this type of projects, not only from the financial viewpoint, it's an environmental and a health project, and it can also help the economy. It can be commercially helpful, and it can benefit the people who work with us. It creates jobs, and it has a huge social impact. We were talking before about where we install the plants and the harm that these plants can cause to children. That's a bias. So people should be educated. That's a part of the success of these environmental projects. That is a very important item. With regard to the energy management, we produce 49 million kilowatts per hour yearly. We have 50,000 people devoted to this type of project, and I believe these figures are interesting. We have 42,000 industrial facilities. This may be an additional revenue.
selling of power and not only electricity to industries. And we also are one of the main providers of green energy and the management of industrial energy, which increases the possibilities for companies. As Carlos was saying, Marcos was mentioning the importance of the investments and maintenance of projects through their life cycle. These assurances that the project is going to work is the value, part of the value the company offers to the society. And this is something we have to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about the operators. And going back a little bit to waste to energy, Veolia's mission in the Brazilian market, we have been talking a lot about this in these presentations, talking about these auctions surrounding this theme. In our company, all of us who want to see this marketing development are very interested in seeing all this happening. The fact of that a project has worked, and we do hope it's going to be really good. This is very important for our market. Veolia was very excited with the results of this auction. Since we have a space, a project, we were happy to have a part in all that, because we think this is important for the market, and we still have a long way to go. And no doubt we do identify opportunities in this area. So first we're going to talk to you about the challenges. We had a first auction, and we are waiting to see how this is going to proceed. It's very important to see this become real. And it's important that it goes beyond being incorporated into the energy matrix. It's important for it to create value. And I also think you have mentioned this also. It's very important to have strategic partnerships. We can't carry out a project like this alone. So we need a partnership between the various players in the market. We have that opening, and we really want to form partnerships for that, to make these projects real, working together for the success in the market. Once again, Marcos was talking about investments. Thanks to our experience in other markets and what we see in Brazil, waste to energy project requires intensive investments. Veolia very often has its own investments, and we have investment funds that work with us. We also need to follow the legal structure and look at the structure of the projects that will bring reliability and trust to the market, because it will be competing with many other products that have nothing to do with waste to energy. So we need to work on this lobby that is leading these partnerships and organizations. And these partnerships need to be able to work together so they can reach the key investments for projects of this kind. There are opportunities in auctions. It was very interesting to see how it proceeded. We have ongoing projects in many areas, like in Brasilia, in Barueri, and so on. Mercado is the market is progressing, and we feel like participating in it. And we really want to participate in this change in the energy matrix. Veolia has over 90 plants all around the world, working with hazardous and non-hazardous solid waste, creating renewable energy and heat. Our work with, I think you call it heating. We have an important part of the advising process in the projects, and it's very important to accommodate existing technologies and adapt it to the types of residues you're working with in the project, and follow up, so we have sustainable projects throughout, as we were talking, especially regarding the emissions of greenhouse gases. We have talked about that, and I think it's very important to keep an eye on this aspect, and not let it to be known after the project. The long-term partnerships are very important with performance guarantees, so a detailed study is very important. Legal stability is also important, and we have to analyze the impact in all the players in the market. And a good structure for the project is the key to make it feasible. Technical excellence and experience is important. You can get, when you have projects of this level of investment, you need the expertise to do it. And innovations. The first plants we built are very different from the ones we have now today. We have evolved a lot with optimization of maintenance, profitability of the investment, and all that is involved. And here is a graph that shows a little bit of the operation of a plant. We have a complete program with an impact for all the players, as I was saying. So it's very interesting to look at all the aspects involved, and it's important to look at even at the use and reuse of the ashes that are generated in the process. So we have to look at the project as a whole from beginning to end, and we have to look at the power production of the heat that is produced. What can Veolia do in this? Everything that has to do with design, the choice of power that is going to start the process we're working with. This is very important when we're talking with the manufacturers and the equipment and bringing all knowledge we have. It's very important to bring this business model here to Brazil, and I think we can really contribute with the knowledge. It's very important to have an operator like Veolia, and with the great performance in environmental, financial, and production terms. The success cases we have. Here we bring some data. If you want more information, you can contact us. I'll talk some of about some of my favorites. I'm from Spain. One of the very important uh, projects we have is in Spain we have uh, it has there's a lot we can do there. It's an project that affects several municipalities. I like very much a project we have in Shanghai. We have a larger and larger population. This is a big city. For those of you who live in São Paulo, this would not surprise you. But this increase in population that doesn't leave space for landfills, but which presents greater needs for energy. So this project consumes 10% of the urban waste of Shanghai, and it has treated over 800 tons and has generated a lot of energy. So all these residues that come, it not only has great impact, a very important impact on the population. And finally, the final project I want to talk about is the one of Portugal, implemented in Porto. It's started like 25 years ago. We have many very big transformation of urban residues for 1 million inhabitants, transforming it into energy. It's a very big size, and at 80%, 87% of the energy generated feeds the national grid. I don't know if we have time. We have a short video. Yes, Laura, we have time. We're fine. We'll have time for questions and answers. You can go ahead. I'm going to show the video. I just click play, I guess.
Vivemos momento histórico. Nunca antes o
We
futuro da
live a
humanidade esteve
historical
tão
moment.
intimamente
Never
ligado aos
in the
imperativos
future of
ambientais.
humanity has been so connected to the environment changes. It's an urgent change. This biodiversity is disappearing, resources are scarce, our house is dying. Everybody knows, everybody talks about it. We need to act. Concrete solutions with high impact exist, and we need more than ever of the industry to accelerate its implementation. But there are other problems that need solving. We need to do all we can to create solutions for tomorrow. We need to go and follow and work. We don't have time. We have to change the way we do it to conciliate environment and human development, do things clearly and in a structured manner. That's why Veolia has higher ambition, transforming ecological transformation. That means adapting our ways, the ways we produce and consume, putting ecology in the center of our processes and decisions. That means developing radical solutions that are useful to face the essential challenges of humanity. Reducing carbon emissions, having circular economy to fight lack of resources, reduce pollution of air, water, and earth, protect biodiversity, and finally have a more intensive and efficient ecology. Nothing would be possible with a coordinated action of our clients, investors, partners, and society, and clients and society as a whole, all involved in an efficient, multifaceted approach for environmental, social, economic benefits to transform the whole, decontaminate, clean, purify, recycle, value, preserve, and facilitate access to resources since ever, Veolia designed solutions to build a better, sustainable future for all. Today, we want to be a reference for ecological transformation. Our Desires Gate transformation, ecological transformation is our mission.
Wonderful, Laura. Excellent video. I hadn't seen it before. Really touching. And this is precisely the moment we find ourselves in. Water resources are more and more scarce, and natural resources also. We should do something. I separated some data which I would like to show you before we move on. And I believe it's important to give people a sense of dimension. As you mentioned, 25 years ago, we did not have any plants. Now we have something like 390 plants. Even so, we have lots of waste that is left. We are talking about 300,000 tons per year of the material that goes into the plants. But in order to have some type of comparison, even for our partners from the International Association and the Committee of the Energy Recovery, only in Brazil, and I will not go into details on the civil works industry. In the world, we have 200,000 tons per hour. If you take a plant that consumes 300,000 tons per year, we generate that each hour in the world. So we have 2.2 million tons per year. And that's approximately 9-10%. I don't remember from the last data I have seen, including from that plant that Marcos has shown us in Copenhagen. That's where I got that data. It's one of the most recent data I have, but in order to make a comparison, it's important. We believe it's a lot, but we have a lot to do. There's a lot ahead of us. As we said in the last panel, we do have room for everyone, but resources are scarce. Unfortunately, I saw recent information that 40% of the methane emissions in California affect us. This is specific data. We have reports from NASA. We have focuses of methane, not only natural gas, but methane that comes from those landfills. So we should work to mitigate that. We have a Herculean work ahead of us. I'd like to thank you all once more for the initiatives and for the series of tech solutions you have shown us, and also Marcos. Flavio, before I give the floor to you, I'd like to ask a question. Laura, Marcos, feel free. The audience always likes to have that question answered, and they sent it to us. Feel free to make your comparisons. We have been asked, good afternoon, what's the destination of the ashes of the incineration process? What is done to that material? Everyone likes to hear that answer. Laura, Marcos, feel free to answer as you would like to. Feel free to discuss with me also. Who's the first one? I have an answer. Okay, Laura, go ahead. I will speak then. Okay. Let us leave Marcos for the end. The other day, we were making an assessment, and I was talking to an expert from Paris. I asked, how can we generate accessory revenues to make these projects more feasible? And he said, yes, they're very important, Laura. And I said, yes, what we can do to these things? And they said we can use the ashes to create a material for highways, to build highways. I don't remember the word in Portuguese, but it's highways. Effectively, one of the best ways of using those ashes is that there are many agreements related to using the ashes to create material to build highways. That's an interesting accessory revenue. and a good destination. Precisely. Perfect. That's a great example. And in the last report I have seen related to gas emissions from BRM, it says that that's one of the major destinations of ashes in the world. Marcos, would you like to say what happens to the ashes? Well, the ash is not considered a villain anymore. Initially, ashes were destined to the landfills because, differently from other fuels, now this has advanced, it has evolved, but no one knew precisely, no one felt sure. There was no scientific evidence related to the energy recovery, waste to energy process. So the ashes that leave the boiler and the ashes from the biomass, we have some advanced research that takes us to established regulations, and we are already aware that those ashes are being used commercially just as the other ashes are used. However, this is very recent because people are afraid with regard to the components of this ash. Not only the components, but since the fuel varies a lot, they had difficulties understanding how they could feel sure that the ashes from different origins would be inert and would be safe to apply, or if it could be used for anything, or if it could only be used specifically for asphalt, cement, or for a specific type of application. And you already knew this process would be safe and could be used and could add some safety feature. So this is what used to happen. Now we are evolving. We are close to using ashes in waste to energy for commercial use. As I said in the example of West Palm Beach, it goes to the landfill. That's 5% of the original volume of the waste that goes through the boiler. Congratulations, Marcos. Thank you. It's important to mention that value because the volume is being reduced by 95%. It's an expressive volume. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you, Laura. Great, amazing presentations. We are now coming to the end, but I would like to introduce our colleague, Flávio. I had an interference. I'd like to introduce Flávio Matos, who is following us directly from Paris. He will give us some more interesting data. And we want to demystify a few issues. Welcome, Flávio. How are you doing? Thank you very much. It is always an honor and a pleasure to cooperate with these important events. And I know you are a giant in the area of events. It's a pleasure to be cooperating with IFAT at this event. We do hope to have other events in the future, fairs and presential events. It's an honor to be a part of the same panel with two gigantic companies, Veolia and Wilcox. You have decades of experience, and Veolia is the greatest player in the world. You can really be considered a gigantic company, and you can really be helpful. You can help us with the development of that industry in Brazil. The company and other members of ABRAM who are already getting ready. They are being prepared to work in the first projects in Brazil. Our panel is related to success cases. Unfortunately, we have none in Brazil. We do not have plants in Brazil or in Latin America yet. It's the only continent in the world where we have no plants. Russia is developing plants. There are plants in the southeast of Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, India, Russia, Africa is developing those plants. Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the Middle East is also developing those plants. Dubai. There are many, many projects that are underway, and some projects are not being implemented. Waste only increases, even though it's a major priority in this industry. This reality is not for today, maybe not even for tomorrow, but for the day after tomorrow. This waste will continue to be generated, and with the improvement in the quality of life of the population, also the composition of this waste will change. Possibly it might increase even more. So the major problem in energy recovery and waste to energy is here to be one of the solutions for the problem of waste, with composting, with recycling, and many other treatments. Within the waste to energy system, we know that the maximum priority of any of these systems is avoiding the landfills. The main parameter in waste management is the following: the less waste you send to the landfills, the more you can recover and turn this waste into energy. So I believe we should really mirror ourselves, focusing on what we have heard. We should be followed by companies like Veolia and companies that really have conditions to implement this type of project in Brazil. It's essential to have conversations and discussions with those who have already done it, like Babcock and Veolia. Brazil really needs that. There are many people who want to do nothing, actually, but also we need a technological contribution. We should focus on what we can do with the waste. Sometimes when we criticize technology, we are not only criticizing, but we are talking about the use of this technology. We see an ill use of technology, which is impressive. First of all, if we are talking about conventional collection and not selective waste collection, the reality is different. We should prioritize this recycling and selective collection of waste. I would like to share my screen with you and show you the ideal system, not only how we see it, but how the ideal system would look in terms of treatment and management of waste. When we have a selective collection, we have high quality material, and the people who will work in the separation of this material should have good hygienic conditions instead of putting their hands in the mixed waste. So we have many initiatives on the way in Brazil. People want to get involved, but sometimes they lack technical knowledge, and it's necessary to develop projects focused on this. This should become a priority. We have been creating lots of jobs, and we have more jobs that will be created, but we need to have the proper conditions. We should have a selective waste collection. That's very important because it allows us to create new jobs, many new jobs. That's unquestionable. So we should do it in the best possible way. Instead of putting people to work with mixed waste, we have the human side of this issue. That's important. And we should have a proper waste treatment system. We cannot use any system if we have a very mixed type of waste. So we can see here some developments with regard to the legislation in Europe, we have a directive that determines the end of the organic treatment of the waste that does not go through the selective collection of waste. This cannot be taken into account within the statistics of the Eurostatics. We have the statistics of energy recovery and electrostatic. It will go into the same classification of the landfills. Of course, they have experience with mixed waste, I believe, but most of them with selective collection waste, and no problem. Technology is great. We have many technologies here.
The problem is not with biogas, but the quality of material that is coming in. And we have to look at the technology to be used. So we need to understand what it's about regarding what is considered waste. Oh, but some people say, oh, technology, you have several technologies that treat waste. It treats non-homogeneous waste, so we have to be very careful in choosing technology. What the technology is going to used for, to begin with. It's not only putting technology there and so on. Thermal treatment, incineration, could be able to handle any kind of residue because it's very robust. But you can't treat all waste thermically. You need to separate and screen all that. You need some composting from the material. And with what is really waste, you would send to thermal treatment, generate energy. And going back to what we debated before, you then have the ashes and it would be dealt differently. We produce different kinds of solid residue in these plants. You have the 5 or 10% of residues that are compared to what comes in that are final, and then you have what we could call in English fly ashes that represent most of like 3 or 4% of the residues. In France, 70 or 80% of the waste is recycled, and the Netherlands 80%. In other countries, depending on the material they use and the way they do and everything, there are norms, regulations, and applications for all that. So recycling material is used in all different ways, and this allows for saving natural resources and all kind of that. Sorry about that. My battery's at the end. Sorry about that. And then we have the ashes, the flying ashes. And these are toxic. They need proper treatment, and we were talking about that before, and I separated a slide of these big players in the process. And they have a partnership with another company to recycle even the toxic ashes without having them destined to the landfills. So this graph shows how you could recycle this fly ash. You recover salt from that, metals and all that. So the technology is entering even into that small volume of what would be destined to the landfill. So soon this kind of plant will be able to treat 100%. Well, they treat it, but it will prevent the generation of waste. We'll get to 95 or 100% of the material, and we hope that in a few years we'll be able to reuse or deal with 100% of the waste. But I wanted to highlight the necessity of understanding context, not only technology, but the context, so we can choose the proper technological path to implement. In many cases, we see a lot of technologies that work with homogeneous residues, but we have to be very careful, because we can't think that a large project will be able to use a technology that has not been proven from decades of tries. I'm talking about reports from the European Commission, about technical committees and all that, saying that you can clearly say that after 10 decades of using this technology for urban residues, they have not been successful so far. So we haven't started trying last year or 10 years ago. We've been doing this for decades. People love innovations, and we forget to look at what has happened already, what works or doesn't work around the world. We have a lot of maturity around the world in technology terms, so we have to look at the performance. There's no secret in that, so just raise the attention for that. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I want to highlight the risk of some technologies. We have a company that a renowned, well-known company around the world that developed a project. We are losing the audio. I think he has frozen. We'll wait for a few minutes to see if he comes back. Just testing. Marcos, Laura, do you hear me? Okay, let's wait for Flavio a few minutes. He seems to be frozen. I think his video is frozen. Jamasi, I think he's having connection problems. Let's wait for a few minutes. Flavio was going to comment on some technologies. Maybe he's creating some suspense on that. Let's wait for a few minutes, but we're going a little bit over our time. I want to thank him. If he can see us, I want to thank him from the presentation. We also are going after time, but we do, these interferences happen. I think we can close. Rafael, if you want to take on. I think we had some precise interventions by Marcos and Laura. So what we have to do now is work. I want to thank Jamasi again. He's been following us since the beginning. I just want to thank you all for the invitation. It was great. Your ministry is fantastic to continue. We need to work together. Government, private and public sector, we need to work together. I started mentioning since the beginning. This is the role of a brand. Reinforce this joint work so we can have progress, so we can achieve sanitation. We need to show we are serious on that. We need to be aligned, show cohesion in the market. We need to show that the things are happening, because without that we won't have the results we expect from our work. For us who know the market is huge, we can have huge results, we can have population, area, and all that. We have everything. I even tell our partners, we don't like financing or resources or technology. I want to reinforce what Marcos and Laura said. It is essential that we do things correctly, that we are very careful with details. We're not reinventing the wheel, but we have to be careful. We need serious work. We're working with residues. We are working, as Marcos said, to create new projects. We need to analyze the data. We have data from the residues, so we need to talk. And among the regionalizations, Brazil is a continental country, so we need to divide and map all this to work. So I thank everybody who has participated in our debates in the morning. It was great to show the market, show our partners that Brazil is together, that we are working together. It's not only water and sanitation or resources, water resources and all that. We need to work together at all government levels, looking for cohesive actions. I want to thank Abran for that. So I'm going to pass the floor on to Rafael. And thank everybody. Thank you for helping us with this great work, and we hope to continue to bring events from Methane Merchant to Brazil in the next 2 years. Brazil and Latin America are always the last continent to join. The recycling index is 2 to 3% in the country. We have more than 3,000 landfills and open dumps open. So unfortunately, we hope to bring you guys over. So thank you very much. I'll leave the last words to you. Thank everyone, Laura, Marcos, Jamasi. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you, Jamasi. Thank you, Flavio. Unfortunately, he lost his connection in the last minutes. This is a live event, so we need, we always have emotion. We had some problems with connection in the morning. This is the beauty of technology. It allows for connecting people from all corners of the country. Flavio from Paris, but sometimes it leaves us hanging. It's part of everything. So from the whole day, the lesson we can learn is that we are in the right path. We are proposing solutions. We need to have an open mind and an open market for this kind of work, to debate a subject that is as important as sanitation, energy recovery. This is something we have to do for yesterday. We are facing a critical issue around the world. Brazil is the last country in the world to install a waste to energy plant, and we have to think of the future, not only of the nation, but of the future generations that will live here. Thank you all very, very much, Marcos, Laura, for the cases you presented. Thank you for the information you were able to share with us and our audience. I am sure you have brought out great value and shown that it's possible. When we look of the number of projects and the feasibility of projects, as Laura said, project of Porto, where we have 1 million inhabitants, you have a plant running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. the reality here in Brazil, in Campinas. Campinas is a region with 1 million inhabitants, so it's very feasible. This is very possible. If you go to Osasco, Barueri, or the surrounding cities in São Paulo, we are close to 1 million inhabitants, so this is feasible. We only need time and investment and moving things forward. I want to thank our audience, thank again our sponsors that supported in this first forum of sanitation and energy recovery. Binder Engineering, Pierre Lisi are gold sponsors. Komatsu, our silver sponsor. All other supporters, and this event is important to mention, will be available until November 14th in the same platform, so you can go back and watch all speeches, all presentations until the November 14th. And I want to say that in 2022 we'll be back. Follow the forum site. Keep our email in your income box. You'll have news soon. Thank you very much again, and see you soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, everyone.
Qual é a base de uma grande parceria? Como você sabe que pode confiar e contar que esse parceiro esteja lá quando você precisar dele, não importa onde você esteja? Quando se trata de seu negócio, ajudaria a saber que a marca tem 100 anos de experiência fabricando equipamentos de qualidade, no quais equipes, como a sua, confiam em todo o mundo? Importaria se você soubesse que essa empresa se fundamenta na ideia de que a inovação e a tecnologia podem sustentar comunidades? E se, a cada vez que você trabalhasse com essa empresa, aprendesse novas maneiras de fazer sua empresa avançar? E acordar sabendo que, independentemente dos desafios que o mundo trouxer para você hoje, sua parceira estará ao seu lado com as percepções e o suporte de que você precisa. Por um século, a Komatsu foi essa parceira. Nossas raízes remontam a uma floresta exuberante no Japão que já abrigou uma mina de cobre vital à comunidade vizinha. Dessa floresta e da imaginação de nosso fundador, emergiu uma empresa global com um compromisso intransigente com qualidade, confiabilidade, inovação e a parceria que você precisa para capacitar você a impulsionar nossa sociedade. Hoje, sabemos que resolver seus desafios comerciais também devem resolver os sociais. A capacidade deve ser combinada com dados inteligentes, criatividade com resultados comprovados e sucesso financeiro com o bem social. Por meio da colaboração, podemos criar o mundo de que precisamos para as gerações que virão. É por isso que você confia na Komatsu, a sua parceira para criar um futuro sustentável onde negócios, pessoas e o nosso planeta prosperem.
Esse vídeo é sobre algo que fazemos todos os dias: gerar lixo. O Brasil gera em torno de 80 milhões de toneladas de resíduos sólidos urbanos por ano, o equivalente a 30 estádios do tamanho do Maracanã. E quase nada disso é reciclado, pois 96% de tudo isso vai para aterros sanitários ou lixões a céu aberto. Apesar dos significativos esforços através da reciclagem de catadores, compostagem e aproveitamento de gás de aterro, a valorização energética vem para complementar essas tecnologias, visando a quase total mitigação dos gases do efeito estufa, como é feito em países desenvolvidos. O conhecimento e educação sobre o processo do seu lixo podem trazer benefícios ambientais, sociais e até mesmo econômicos. Usinas Waste to Energy são baseadas na recuperação energética, através do tratamento térmico do lixo. A ABREM, a Associação Brasileira de Recuperação Energética de Resíduos, busca resolver dois grandes problemas atuais: a destinação dos resíduos sólidos e a geração de energia limpa. Seu lixo pode virar eletricidade, energia para a produção de cimento, combustíveis, empregos, evitar a contaminação da água potável, reduzir as emissões de gás de efeito estufa até 8 vezes, além do aumento dos níveis de reciclagem, já que os países que mais tratam termicamente seus resíduos são os que detêm os melhores índices de reciclagem e compostagem. A ABREM quer revolucionar o setor de resíduos no Brasil, e você está convidado a fazer parte dessa história conosco.
sustentável onde negócios, pessoas e o nosso planeta prosperem.